This Pyro guide is meant to teach you the basic tactics and just overall use of the Pyro, so that way when you get out there and play, you'll be a fairly competent player. It's not really going to teach you to be a pro player. You can take what you got from here and kind of work from it from there, or maybe even make an advanced guide afterwards. But this is basically just to get you started. You know, you got to learn to walk before you can run. And the Pyro is a very offensive class. He's more or less going to be on the not so much a frontline fighter, but he'll definitely be jumping into the fray, not only causing your enemies, headache, but also grievous burns. It's a close to mid-range class. There's some people who would try to argue that with the flare gun, it could actually go ahead and be, viable in long-range combat, but not so much, and I'll explain the reasons why later on in the video. With this, I'm going to go ahead and go over the basic layout as far as the Flamethrower, which is the main weapon of the Pyro, the shotgun, the secondary weapon, and the axe, which is the melee-based weapon of the class. But I'll probably go over the Backburner to some degree, which is the alternate for the Flamethrower, the flare gun, which is the alternate to the shotgun, and the Axtinguisher, which is the alternate to the axe, as we kind of go through it all. Now, the Pyro is great in close quarters combat, not only because of just the Flamethrower and the constant stream of fire that he can kind of throw out there. Also, if you use in conjunction with the Axtinguisher, which again I'll probably talk a little bit more later, you can do some really massive damage. It's kind of a nightmare for most classes to see you coming down a close corridor or for you to be sneaking up behind them, which also makes them very good for ambush style tactics, kind of just catching any of your opponents by surprise. That's generally where you're going to cause the most amount of havoc. And you're also going to be the absolute bane of the spy's existence, which is absolutely funny because the Pyro more or less is the anti-spy. And what's great about the Pyro when it comes to dealing with spies is they're probably the most important member of a team when it comes to spy checking. Just a short, tiny little burst of fire to each teammate is the difference between, igniting a would-be spy and showing them off to the team, or even you killing them yourself, and the difference between life or death or backstab to somebody on your team, especially for the fact that if a spy happens to be cloaked and you just so happen to be spurting flames around, they'll still ignite. You'll still see an invisible figure kind of catch on fire, and that's when you're going to know, hey, that's a spy. I mean, that's also going to be helpful if they have the dead ringer, because generally what will happen is if you light them on fire and they go ahead and the dead ringer beforehand, you'll see the fire and the body kind of just fall, and you can still quickly spout flames nearby and they'll just ignite again. This time they'll be invisible on fire, and you can still go ahead and catch them, make sure they have a permanent death. Besides the whole getting in the enemy's face, just torching them all to hell and back, so to speak, and just again causing absolute mayhem and fire and destruction, the Pyro is still good for other uses. I mean, there's been more enough times, even in this video you'll see, to where you can even capture the intelligence. I mean, there's few things more terrifying than actually seeing a Pyro who's also ubered out, just going into an entire team, just completely devastating them as well. So they're a viable option as far as on the offensive, as far as capturing intelligence, or even on defensive side as far as keeping somebody from getting the intelligence, because you can air blast them to kind of push them back towards their own base, or even, the whole capture, defend, and so on. So, I mean, there's many different uses as far as a teammate for the Pyro. The Flamethrower is going to be your primary weapon, and generally what you're probably going to be using for the most part, or at least, again, if it's close range, because the flames only extend out so far. So, I mean, this can be kind of a pain for when you're going against scouts or some of the other faster classes, or if they're simply just too far away to begin with and you're already trying to blow fire, you generally want to try to avoid that, because again, it's close to mid-range. Now, the good thing about the Flamethrower is the fact that even one little burst of flame hits them, they ignite. So they're going to be taking constant damage even if you're no longer have them caught on fire. But if you're going against another Pyro, or if a Pyro's trying to ignite you, it doesn't last nearly as long as it would against a normal character. That's why the best and most effective use of the Flamethrower is to keep them engulfed in the flame. And that's against any class you're going up against, even against other Pyros, because then you're getting that constant burn damage, and if they do try to get away, Again, they're still going to be burning at least for a time, but if you get them close enough, it's usually going to result in death. And even sometimes, if you're burning them long enough, and they do end up killing you, afterwards, if you're already dead, sometimes they'll burn long enough that you'll be able to kill them from the grave, so to speak. When an opponent's ignited, the only way they can really go to put out that flame is either to go ahead and jump into the water. If a fellow sniper happens to be around and they have a jar of Girardi, they can go ahead and throw and hit them, then they're covered in piss, but at least the fire's out. Or there's also instead of the axe, there's a replacement that the pyro can actually get to also kind of extinguish the flames. But there's not usually that many ways on hand to go ahead and put out the fire other than it just going out over time, which again is why you want to go ahead and keep that constant jet stream of fire on the opponent to try and kill him. The flamethrower's secondary attack is a kind of little burst of air, an air blast, that is very good for not only just offensive or defensive options. What it can actually do is that little blast of air for a very small amount of ammo, it's actually only about 20 ammo, can actually reflect any kind of, most projectiles, such as if a soldier's firing a rocket at you, if a grenade's being launched from the grenade launcher of a demo, or even if a sniper is actually trying to hit you with an arrow from a huntsman. You can actually deflect that arrow right back into their face, which is just classic. It can also be used to go ahead and, as I mentioned, as far as the whole capturing a point or even capturing intelligence, can be used to kind of push an enemy away, which is a good setup for other teammates to try and to attack that person while they're kind of just stuck in midair and not being able to do much. Or again, kind of just push them back so you can hopefully get somebody to go ahead and help you out. And also on a defensive end, if you see like just God knows how many rockets, like I have sometimes in a payload map, just coming at you, you may not be able to reflect all those rockets to kill all those enemies, but you can at least go ahead, and if you have a nice amount of teammates behind you, go ahead and just reflect all the projectiles that otherwise probably would have murdered you all. And hopefully your teammates appreciate it. If not, well, at least you know you're doing a good job. The Backburner is the alternate version of the Flamethrower. And what's great about the Backburner is, exactly as the name kind of implies, it does the most amount of damage when you go ahead and sneak up from behind on most enemies. So it makes it a very good, actually it makes it a great ambushing weapon. So if you're able to get the element of surprise or get the drop on your opponents, they're going to be taking automatic criticals with the entire time you're hitting them with a jet stream of fire. The only downside to it is there's going to be no random criticals during any other time other than you hitting them from behind. Not only that, but when you do the air blast, the compressed air blast, it's actually going to be 50 ammo instead of 20. So it's already going to be taking out a nice little chunk of your ammo just to be able to do that. So you kind of have to weigh your options as far as what you're going to be doing at the time. The area for criticals, unfortunately, is going to be smaller than the Spy's actual backstab, as to where a Spy's backstab is going to be a full 180 degrees. The actual area for the Pyro to be able to hit is going to be considered from behind to do the automatic criticals from the jet stream of fire is 90 degrees. Which, I mean, it's still really not that hard to get off. I mean, most of the time when you sneak up behind somebody, you're going to be within that 90-degree angle anyway, so it's not too big of a deal. When you're going up against opponents that like to kind of stay out of your reach, that if they know a pyro well enough, they're going to know generally how far that flame can extend from the flamethrower of any kind. Or if you're just dealing with faster enemies that can usually get out of that fire quick enough and just continue to try and attack you, that's generally when you're going to go ahead and use your secondary weapon, which is going to be your shotgun. It's going to be more of your, again, close to mid-range weapon. It's going to be a little more effective, again, because of how much distance you can go ahead and fire. It can even be used long range to an extent, but generally you're not going to see the amount of hits because it is a shotgun blast. From long range, it's really not going to do as much damage as it would medium or even close range combat. But at least it's a viable option if you have nothing else to go with, because, well, we can't hit them with an axe because they're not right in your face, and you can't hit them with a flamethrower blast because they're just not close enough for the flames to extend out that far. The flare gun is a great secondary weapon to use against enemies that are generally further away, even further than what the shotgun would generally fire at. The only downside, as I kind of hinted to earlier on in this video, is it's not the best option. I wouldn't exactly say that it is the long-range answer for the pyros, simply because of the fact that the actual flare gun shot is kind of slow and it's really not that hard to dodge. So again, it's a weapon that's best used at close to medium range. Not only that, but what makes the flare gun great is once you actually ignite an opponent, you automatically do additional damage for as long as they're on fire with not only the flamethrower but the axe, or especially the Axtinguisher. The standard melee weapon for the Pyro is going to be his axe. It's nothing too special. I mean, it's just the melee weapon of the class. It really doesn't do too much. It doesn't have any special properties to it. It's good to have if you're able to get a drop on the enemy and you want to go in for just like a nice clean kill, because it doesn't take that many hits to go and kill somebody with the axe, and you're just trying to conserve ammo. The Axtinguisher replaces the axe and is an amazing substitute if you're really good at, well, not only just igniting your opponents but also getting them with a flare gun, because once they're on fire, when you actually hit them with the Axtinguisher, it does 150% damage. So it's really just going to wreck them in just about 1 or 2 shots in most cases. It's going to do a crazy amount of damage. The downside to it is there's no random criticals off of the Axtinguisher. Not only that, if you go to use the Axtinguisher on an opponent who's not ignited, it does 50% less damage. So the best time to be using the Axtinguisher, like I said, is when you're igniting them either from any version of the flamethrower or any of the flare guns. Overall, the Pyro is a lot of fun to play as, especially if you're somebody who enjoys burning things but doesn't exactly want to go ahead and risk jail time. They're a very important member of the team, especially when it comes to dealing with spies. They're really going to be your saving grace in most cases, because again, other classes can spy check, but nobody will be able to spy check as efficiently as the Pyro. And that really about does it for the Be the Pyro, the TF2 Pyro guide. So if you liked it, feel free to go ahead and leave any comments or questions below. Like it, subscribe to it, and just all the other stuff that you would generally do on YouTube.